Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over my core plays for week 15 of the NFL season on DraftKings. And yes, this video is coming out 2 days earlier than usual, but I had some extra time this week, so I figured I'd dig into this slate a lot quicker, and I just, bang through my notes here. So I am ready to go. I am looking forward to this slate. I do think it's a pretty good one. And with this video being out so much earlier, I might have time to make an extra video on Friday in place of this video. So maybe something like chalk plays with GPP pivots, or something like value play video, something along that nature. So we'll just go from there. And then I'll get my showdown video out later tonight as well. But anyway, before we continue, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. I really like to get to 3K subscribers this weekend. That'd be pretty sweet. Thank you guys for all the support on this channel. For those of you who already are subscribed, or leave likes and leave comments as well, because I do like interacting with you guys. And speaking of leaving comments, in the comments below, I want to know who your guys' lock of the week is this week. I am leaning personally towards Chris Godwin or Chris Carson this week. So it's either going to be two Chris's, and I'm not just being, I just don't have a Chris bias here, even though my name's Chris. So I just think the two Chris's are in perfect spots this week, and they're both benefiting from someone being injured. So as of right now, those are my top two candidates, and I'd love to hear who your guys' lock of the weeks are as well. And without further ado, I say we could probably get right into this video. And also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at ChrisPennell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets I build every single week, links in the description below for my Patreon as well as my Discord chat as well. All right, so let's get into the video. I've said that twice now, but so on to the quarterback position. So I have 3 quarterbacks I really like this week, and I'm more than likely going to end up on 3 of them because I really don't like any of the value options this week besides one, which I will mention the value one. But as of right now, my 3 core plays will start off with Deshaun Watson at 6,800. I just think he's a fantastic play this week. I was on him last week, and he was very high owned, and it was a tougher matchup versus Denver, but I love this spot for Deshaun Watson. This is one of my favorite games for fantasy of the week. We have a 50-point over-under, which leads the entire slate, which I know Texans-Titans really doesn't sound like a game that would be that high scoring, but the way these two offenses have been playing lately, especially the Tennessee Titans, it makes a lot of sense, and these teams don't have great defenses, especially through the air. And Watson is actually coming in as a 3-point dog here, so this just sets up very well for him to have a pretty big game through the air or on the ground as well. He does have rushing upside. And it's also much easier to throw in the Tennessee Titans. Like, they are 5th DVA versus the run, and they're 20th DVA versus the pass. It's like the Texans are the best running team in the world anyway. So we're going to want to attack these guys through the air, and Deshaun Watson is definitely capable of doing so. And we just saw Derek Carr drop 20 points on the Tennessee Titans defense last week, and I'd obviously trust Deshaun Watson more than I would trust Derek Carr. So I do think we're capable of another 30-point outing from Deshaun Watson. Another thing I love with Watson is that he offers us some rushing upside as well. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last week, 6 rushing attempts, 44 yards. Not many quarterbacks have his kind of rushing upside outside of guys like Lamar Jackson. Russell Wilson's also got some rushing upside, but Deshaun Watson, he's right up there as in the second tier below Lamar Jackson, because no one's even close to Lamar Jackson. But I do like Deshaun Watson here, and he's got arguably the best wide receiver in the game to throw the ball to, so I think he's a pretty strong play this week. So he's my core play number 1 at quarterback. And then right below him, I think you could go to Ryan Tannehill again, 6,500. I think I've said you could play the guy pretty much every single week since he's been a starter. I think I was on him the 1 week. When did he start? Was it versus the Chargers? Or was it versus... No, I think it was versus Tampa Bay is when I first started getting on the Ryan Tannehill train, and he's been very good ever since. And the prices come up on him quite a bit. I mean, this is the most expensive we've seen him all season. He's been living in that 5K range, but this is just a reflection of how good Ryan Tannehill has actually been. And I mean, he's been very, very good. He's second in completion percentage, only behind Drew Brees. He's completing 73.4% of his passes this season. Now, I will say this is a smaller sample size than most quarterbacks, but still, 8-game sample size isn't too bad. He leads the league in yards per pass attempt at 9.8 yards per attempt. In the second is 8.6, which is Matthew Stafford. So he's not some just dink and dunker. He is throwing the ball downfield. I know that doesn't sound like someone like Ryan Tannehill, but that's just what he's doing. And he's fourth. He has the 4th best passing grade on PFF, 2nd best rushing grade out of all quarterbacks. He leads the league in quarterback rating at 118.5. He's been great. I mean, 31 points, 14 points isn't terrible, but it's not the greatest. But then 33 points, 19. 28, 19. He has been solid all season. Let me shrink my face a little bit. I feel like it's taken over the screen a little bit. But yeah, Ryan Tannehill, he's been a very good quarterback, and it also helps that he has a bulldozer at running back to help take the pressure off him as well. The teams will bite on that run all day. You can fake it, send the ball deep, or just pick him apart in intermediate routes. I just think Ryan Tannehill sets up really well here, and Derrick Henry obviously is going to help him. And like I said, I love this game for fantasy purposes. We have a 50-point over-under, and the Titans have a 26.5 team total, which might not sound like a lot, but on this slate it actually is, because there's not a lot of high-scoring games on this slate in Vegas. And this is a great matchup as well. Houston is allowing 23.8 points per game to quarterbacks, which is third most in the NFL, and they most recently just got shredded by Drew Lock, who never started an NFL game before, and they're also 27th DVOA versus the pass, and also has some rushing upside as well. Now, not like Deshaun Watson, but honestly not too far off either. I mean, 4 attempts, 7 attempts where he had 40 yards, 3 attempts for 37 yards. He had that 2 rushing touchdown game versus Jacksonville. I mean, I just don't see why Ryan Tannehill wasn't one of the best plays at quarterback this week. I mean, it might feel a little bit dirty paying $6,500 for someone like Ryan Tannehill. He's just been so good. The matchup is great. They have a high implied team total. I think you can go right to Ryan Tannehill this week. Then the next quarterback I like is Baker Mayfield here, coming at 6,400. So I like all 3 quarterbacks right in a row here. We got Watson, Tannehill, and I like Baker Mayfield a lot at 6,400. And yes, this may be a homer pick, so a disclaimer. I'm a huge Browns fan. I'm wearing my Browns shirt right now. But I'll play just about anybody with a heartbeat versus Arizona besides Duck Hodges. But he's a Duck, so it doesn't really count. But this game should be somewhat solid for fantasy purposes. It's got a 48-point over-under, which is one of the highest on the slate. The Browns have a pretty healthy 25-point implied team total as well, and it's a close 2-point spread, so I could see this being a pretty back-and-forth game. The matchup is just so amazing when it comes to Arizona. They're allowing 26.6 points per game to quarterbacks, which is most in the NFL. 311 passing yards per game, which is most in the NFL. 2.46 passing touchdowns per game, which again is most in the NFL. They're 29th DVA versus the pass. And the Browns actually have the number 2 offensive line versus defensive line pass blocking matchup this week, and that's not something that can be said for the Browns most weeks. And when Baker's had time to throw, he's actually been okay. And when he's not, he's been straight mush. So I do expect him to have some time to throw. And he's got good weapons. He's got Landry. He's got Odell. He's going to have Njoku back. He's got Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. Nick Chubb can take a couple screens. And I just don't see how he doesn't have a good game here. Even if he just puts up the average numbers that Arizona's giving up per week, he's going to smash. I mean, if you're going to give me 310 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns from Baker this week at 6,400, I will take it. And Arizona, when I was all in on Jared Goff at what was it, 2 weeks ago versus Arizona, and the guy hadn't thrown a touchdown in over a month, and he comes in, throws over 300 yards in the first half, and if he didn't get pulled, he honestly could have had a 500-yard game. So, I mean, Baker Mayfield, I think he's an excellent option this week, and I really do like the Baker Landry stack this week. So Baker Mayfield, a core play for me at quarterback this week. I told you guys I do have a value option at quarterback this week, so I will say Ryan Fitzpatrick is interesting if Devontae Parker is back, just because we know how bad the New York Giants pass defense is. So again, keep your eye on Devontae Parker, but as of right now, I am not sure. But he would be in play for me. He's just a little bit risky there. GPP, he's a GPP play only. But at 5,200, we have Mr. Eli Manning here at 5,200. And honestly, wasn't absolute trash for fantasy purposes last week. He only completed 50% of his passes. The weather wasn't great, though, but he still had 2 touchdowns, 200 yards, 16 points. He was serviceable, and it was a good matchup versus the New England Patriots, the Philadelphia Eagles. But it's even better here versus Miami, and they're giving up 23.1 points per game to quarterbacks, which is bottom 5 in the league. They had the dead last 32nd DVOA pass defense in the NFL, and the Giants have a 25-point team total. So I think Eli Manning can get you 200 plus and 2 touchdowns in this matchup. And 5,200 is not asking for much. Would I play him in cash games? Probably not. I don't feel too great about putting my money on Eli Manning in cash games. If you want to run a GPP stack out with Eli Manning and one of his receivers, then you run it back with Devontae Parker. Honestly, it might not be the worst thing in the world. So just someone to keep your eye on, just if you need a value quarterback this week. I don't hate Eli Manning here because Daniel Jones is expected to miss the rest of the season with the injury. So I think you could fire up Eli Manning and maybe a GPP as a low-owned, low-salary quarterback. All right, so on to a more fun position. We have the running backs, and I'm always going to start the running back position off with Christian McCaffrey. He comes in at 10,000, which is actually a price dip, which we haven't actually seen him at 10K in a long time. So, always he just gets the sheer volume and upside every single week, and he's uber talented. And even if a game isn't going their way, he still gets there with his heavy involvement in the passing game. When he's had 25 targets the past 2 weeks. I mean, 25. I mean, a lot of our receivers are jealous of those numbers. Now, I know he's let us down the past 2 weeks with 24 and 17 points. And he also hasn't scored in those 2 weeks, and that's likely going to change because he's pretty much a safe bet for a touchdown every single week, considering he gets near 30 touches every single game. And this is the cheapest he's actually been since week 8. And if he starts getting back into the end zone, I think he easily surpasses 30 points. And it's a solid matchup versus Seattle. They're 22nd DVA versus the run, and he also leads the league in touches per game, total yards, targets for running backs, receptions, DraftKings points per game, 22% target share. There's nothing not to like here. He's talented, he gets volume, he's efficient. I mean, he's a part-time wide receiver. I mean, he puts up wide receiver 1 numbers a lot of weeks. So Christian McCaffrey, awesome play. Is he tough to afford this week? Yes, and honestly, I don't think you have to have him in cash games this week. There's some weeks I feel like you got to play Christian McCaffrey, and there's some weeks I don't. I'm getting the feel that you don't have to play Christian McCaffrey in cash this week. I feel like you can get away with some of the 7K running backs, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So McCaffrey, I do think he's an excellent play, but I don't think he's an absolute lock this week. But I'm always going to have Christian McCaffrey as a core play because of his upside every single week. But going down the list here, so I like the passing game better from the Titans. So I'm going to skip on Derrick Henry, even though he's going to get 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's just a given at this point, but I do prefer the passing game. So Saquon Barkley here at 7,700. I think I'm going to bite the bullet and take the cheap price on Saquon Barkley. I know he's actually been cheaper the past 2 weeks, but Saquon here, has he been disappointing? Certainly. But there's nothing not to like here for a matchup versus Miami, which seems to fix pretty much all of your problems no matter who you are. If you look at his game log, 9 points, 14 points, 8 points, 8 points. It's been pretty rough for Saquon. Now, he's had 20-plus point outings, and he had a really nice stretch, I believe, of, 2 or 3 games to start the year where he had over 100 yards in each game. Then he had the ankle sprain, and then he had that nice game versus, who was that, versus Detroit, which they're one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. We had 28 fantasy points. I still think we can go right back to Saquon this week. Now, I was really on him versus Green Bay. Didn't really turn to much, and honestly, his game looked a lot worse, but he did save his day at the end in garbage time. But this is an elite matchup for Saquon, and I do prefer that Eli Manning is back. Now, I know it didn't really work out last game versus Philly, but they were surprisingly playing with the lead for a good amount of this game, except near the end when they blew it, and the Eagles came back and won in overtime. But Eli has shown that he is not afraid to dump it off to Saquon 10-plus times a game, and we've seen it time and time again dating back to last season. And this is a great matchup. Miami is 29th DVA versus the run, and they are allowing 27.2 points per game to running backs, which is 8th most in the NFL. They also allow a league-high 122 rushing yards per game. And the volume's been there for Saquon. He's 7th in touches, total touches per game. It just hasn't turned too much. He only has 3 touchdowns on the season. I honestly think he gets into the end zone this week, and I think he gets you 100-plus yards. I think he can get you 5-plus receptions, and I think Saquon Barkley, I think this is going to be one of his breakout weeks with Eli Manning under center. So I do like Saquon Barkley quite a bit going up against Miami at home this week. And then the next guy I like is Chris Carson a lot this week. So that's why I don't think you have to play Christian McCaffrey, because I really like Chris Carson, and I really like Saquon Barkley this week. And but there's about 15,000 in total salary compared to McCaffrey at 10,000. So I like the value we're getting with these 2 running backs, and I think they have similar upside. Is their floors as safe? Certainly not, but I do think their upside is pretty close. Now, they're not going to score 50 points like McCaffrey, but given their price tag, I think they're pretty excellent plays. And the main thing here is that Rashad Penny is done for the year, so enter Chris Carson bell cow status once again. And we were playing this guy earlier in the season pretty much every week, so we have no reason not to go back here, right back to the well. I assume he's going to get 20-plus touches again. I mean, earlier in the season, this guy was getting just touches galore. 22 carries, 27, 24, 21, 20. He was just getting all the carries in the world, and they have no choice but to give Chris Carson all the carries here. And this is a matchup we've been drooling over for weeks now. They get to face the Carolina Panthers, who have just given up big week after big week to opposing running backs. And we just saw Devonta Freeman have a pretty good game versus them. And we know Devonta Freeman's been struggling all season. But Carolina, they are 32nd DVA versus the run, second worst run D on PFF rankings. And they are allowing 30.8 points per game to running backs, which is second most in the NFL. And Seattle's main goal here is to run the ball, and that's what they are definitely going to do, and I believe they will have success with it for sure. They're 5-point favorites here, so I see no reason not just to pound the rock with Chris Carson. And I think he honestly gets 100 plus yards and 2 touchdowns in this matchup. And he's also going to be involved in the passing game as well. Probably going to get you a handful of targets. So Chris Carson, one of the best plays at running back on the slate. I prefer Saquon. Well, I shouldn't say I prefer Saquon Barkley. They're like 1A and 1B for me this week just because I like their price ranges and they're going to get 20 plus touches and great matchups. So Chris Carson, one of my favorite plays on the entire slate, and he should be yours as well. So definitely like Chris Carson. And then scrolling down a little bit, or actually before we do that, I want to talk about Leonard Fournette because I do like Leonard Fournette. He's right in between Saquon Barkley and Chris Carson. So honestly, if you want to go 3-7K running backs, I think that's totally fine if you can find the value for it with the wide receiver position. Although I do like a 7K wide receiver, so I'm not sure exactly how easy it's going to be to fit all 3 of these guys. But I do think you should probably get 2 to 3 of these guys in your lineups this week because they're in excellent spots and they're fairly priced. So he finally got his first bad game out of the way last week for this season. He's had double-digit points in every single game, but he finally failed to do so. But other than that, he has been rock solid all season, one of the safest running backs in the league. He still had 21 opportunities, just didn't equate to much. Now, he's not the most efficient back in the world, but the volume is elite, and that's really what I care about when it comes to running backs. And also, the guy's a talented dude, but he's averaging 24.77 touches per game, which is second most in the NFL, 115 total yards per game, which is fourth in the NFL. He's getting nearly 7 targets per game. He's got an 18% target share. He's just one of the safest plays every single week. And he also has a high ceiling. We saw it versus Tennessee, where he had 24 carries, 97 yards, 12 targets, 9 catches, 36 points. They have no problem giving the ball to Leonard Fournette through the air. 12 targets, 11 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets. Those are Christian McCaffrey level kind of targets. He's not as good as Christian McCaffrey through the air, but the targets are really nice that he's getting every single week. And this is a great matchup versus the Raiders as well. They do rank 26th DVA versus the run, and they are allowing 26.2 points per game to running backs, which is 10th most in the NFL. And they are 5.5 point dogs, so I could see a lot of targets going his way, especially if they fall behind. So Leonard Fournette, I do think he's an excellent play, and he's definitely a core play for me this week. I do prefer Carson and Barkley over him, but he's definitely right up there with them. So I'd say, Barkley, Carson, they're 1A, 1B, and then I'd say Leonard Fournette's right there at 2. So do like him. And then I originally had DeAndre Washington wrote up as a core play for me, but Josh Jacobs, unfortunately, is going to be given the good to go. Not unfortunately, I like the guy, and that's not unfortunate for him. I think he's a great guy and a great player, but I really wanted to play DeAndre Washington this week at 4,700, but we do not get that, unfortunately, this week because Josh Jacobs is good to go. So you got the cross out DeAndre Washington. I thought he was going to be one of the best plays of the week. Going up against Jacksonville, their 32nd TVA versus the run. It would have been a perfect spot for a cheap running back, but it's just unfortunately not going to happen this week. So we're going to have to pass on DeAndre Washington. But Patrick Laird, he's not as fun of an option at 4,500, but I do think he's in play because of the price. Now, honestly, this is not a good matchup versus the Giants. It might sound like a good matchup versus the Giants, but they are 11th DVA versus the run, and they've been pretty solid. But the main thing I care about here is that he's involved through the air, so just give me some receptions, and I'll be just fine. And honestly, he's been pretty good the past 2 games with Kalen Ballage being out. Okay, the numbers aren't pretty, but the end result's been good for fantasy. He had 16 points and 12 points, 5 targets in both games. And he's played 82% of the snaps the last week versus the Jets, played about 62% versus Philly. So I do like that. And they are slight dogs, so I do think he's going to get you 5 plus targets here. Should be fine. I think he gets you double-digit points, and I could see him being pretty popular, especially with DeAndre Washington not being the core play that he was looking like on Monday. So Patrick Laird definitely in play for me at 4,500. Plus, everyone loves the guy as well. I think he's pretty cool anyway, so don't mind Patrick Laird here at 4,500. Now, going on to the wide receiver position. So I feel like I struggle with the wide receiver position every week, just like figuring out which guys I would definitely want to play. But this week, I feel it's a little bit different. I feel like I know which wide receivers I want to play this week. And, Chris Godwin, I love Chris Godwin this week. And I already mentioned him that I'm pretty sure he's going to be close to my lock of the week this week. And I just don't see how he doesn't smash here. So he's 7,700. It's expensive, but, no Mike Evans. Unfortunately, he's done for the year. And he's leaving behind a 23% target share, a 35% market share of the team's air yards. And also, he has the most air yards in the league by 400. So there is a lot of opportunity to go around for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was also third in receiving yards as well. So that's a lot of production gone. And, Godwin should benefit here. He's already been heavily involved. It's not like he's stepping into a new role. But, just more targets are going to be funneled his way. The secondary options for Tampa Bay are not that great. Now, the Lions, a good matchup versus the Lions as well. They're allowing the 9th most points per game to wide receivers, and I really like the individual matchup in the slot versus Justin Coleman for Chris Godwin. He runs 63% of his snaps out of the slot, and he will be mainly lined up against slot corner Justin Coleman, who is someone we want to target against. I don't know if you guys remember Anthony Miller on Thanksgiving. I said that was like one of my locks on the Thanksgiving slate. And he had a huge game. That's a big reason I liked Anthony Miller, because he was going to be lining up against Justin Coleman, and he had a huge game versus them. He had, 130, 150 yards versus the Detroit Lions, had a huge game. And now Justin Coleman, he's been bad. He's allowed 7 touchdowns this year, which is tied for second most. 4th most yards per route covered, and Tampa Bay has one of the higher totals on the slate, and I think Godwin needs here. They're not the best rushing team in the league. Jameis Winston likes to chuck the ball. We've seen big games from Chris Godwin. I honestly think it's coming this week, so I think Chris Godwin smashes versus Detroit. I think he gets 10-plus targets here, over 100 yards, and a touchdown or two is definitely in the card. So Chris Godwin, my favorite wide receiver of the week. Then right above him, DeAndre Hopkins comes in at 8K. Now, he's expensive, and I do prefer Godwin, but, open up my Discord. I do prefer Godwin, but I think if you're playing Deshaun Watson, it would make a lot of sense to find the extra 300 to pay up for DeAndre Hopkins, because it makes a better correlation play. And there's nothing not to like here, despite a high price tag. Tennessee is much easier to throw on. I already went over this, than it is to run the ball versus them, but we've seen big name wide receivers have huge games versus them. We saw Tyreek Hill absolutely smash these guys. We saw Mike Evans smash these guys. DeAndre Hopkins, another elite wide receiver 1 here, so I don't see why he can't do the same thing. They're 25th DVA versus the pass, and volume will never be an issue with DeAndre Hopkins or talent. And he's 3rd in targets this year, 2nd in air yards. He's got a 30% target share, which is 2nd in the NFL. 70% weighted opportunity share, which is 2nd, only behind Michael Thomas. He's an expensive pairing with Watson, but they have the potential to absolutely smash here. So DeAndre Hopkins, definitely like him a lot this week at 8K, despite the high price tag, coming off a huge game, 13 targets, 7 catches, 120 yards, 1 touchdown, where the defense forgot to guard the guy. I'm hoping Tennessee forgets to guard him. I don't think they will, but definitely like DeAndre Hopkins a lot this week. And scrolling down a bit, now, Kenny Golladay, it's a great matchup. No Marvin Jones. You can definitely play Kenny Golladay, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to sit here and mention 50 guys that are above 7K. So, yes, you can play Kenny Golladay. He's on a short list for me. If I was doing my PowerPoint where I had the other guys I like at the end, he would be on there for sure. I just want to talk about 100 guys that are priced 7K above, because that doesn't help you guys much, because I'm just like, well, who the heck does he actually like? So I like above 7K. I really like Hopkins. I really like Godwin. So now we're going to go below 7K, and I love Jarvis Landry this week. Now, I believe he was a limited participant this week, but he's going to play. He'll be fine. So Jarvis Landry, I love him a ton this week, and if you're playing Baker, I think it makes a lot of sense to pair him up with Baker. So, or I should say, if you're playing Baker, it makes a lot of sense to pair him up with Jarvis Landry this week. And he's $6,700, which seems a little expensive, but it's not a bad price. Now, he's more expensive than Odell, but he's the wide receiver 1 here. You just got to accept it. He's the wide receiver 1. He's got a better connection with Baker. Odell's playing with the sports hernia and, media circus right now, and he's just a much safer play overall. And he's been good pretty much all season. In this matchup, I'm just salivating over. Jarvis plays the slot on 62% of his snaps, and I love slot receivers versus Arizona. They're allowing 26.2 points per game to slots, which is most in the NFL, and they're allowing the second most points in general to wide receivers, over 40 points per game. So I think Odell will be fine as well. I just trust Jarvis Landry a little bit more, or not a little bit, a lot more here. And he's got the highest target share on the team at 26%. So sign me up. He's an elite stack with Baker, and what should be a solid game for fantasy purposes. So definitely like Jarvis Landry a lot this week. Now, he's not going to probably pop up as a good point per dollar play, but I say screw it. Play Jarvis Landry. I think he's an excellent play this week. And then scrolling down, I'm not going to make Devontae Parker a core play for me because I don't know if he's going to play, but it looks like he took part in non-contact drills during Wednesday. We'll see if he plays. We have no idea. It's completely up in the air, but if he ends up playing, we have to have interest versus New York. They are giving up the second most points per game to wide receivers, and the guy's been a model of consistency with a high ceiling as well. You can't count the last game because he got hurt early, but before that, 37, 15, 25, 11, 15, 11, 16, 11, 17, 8. That was his worst game. Oh, besides New England, 0 and 10 points. So Devontae Parker would definitely be an awesome play. I don't know if he's going to end up playing. I would prefer playing 300 more for Jarvis Landry, but Devontae Parker and GPPs versus the New York secondary I think it'd make a lot of sense. So, I mean, like I said, this might be a sneaky game stack as long as Devontae Parker is healthy, because you could go with SAQUON Barkley, and then run it back with someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick and Devontae Parker. I'd have no problem with that. So, again, someone to keep your eye on injury news. The next thing I want to talk about, now he's overpriced. I will admit that. It's the most expensive he's been by far this season, but A.J. Brown at $6K. I like this guy. I think he's a pretty solid wide receiver. I know he's a rookie and, highly talented one at that, but A.J. Brown, this is a GPP only play for me because, I mean, if you just look at the game log, the guy's hit or miss, 36, 7, 26, 2, 12, 9. But I think this is one of the games where he's going to have a pretty big game here. I mean, the dude's a beast. He looks huge out there, and he can make some big plays. We saw him hit that 91-yard touchdown with Ryan Tannehill last week. And Tannehill, he's throwing the ball deeper than anyone right now, and that fits A.J. Brown very well. And this is an amazing matchup as well, and I love this game environment. I already said this is my favorite game of the week. Houston is 25th DVA versus the pass, and allowing 35.7 points per game to wide receivers. He's also averaging 20 yards per reception, and I think he's an excellent pairing with Tannehill and GPPs. You could also run that back with DeAndre Hopkins, or you could flip-flop that as well, going with DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson, then bringing it back with A.J. Brown. I'd have no problem with that. So A.J. Brown, I think he's an excellent play in GPPs this week. Probably won't pay $6K for him in cash games. Or I won't say probably, I'm not going to. But in GPPs, he can hit the big play. And if he scores 30-plus points, it's going to be pretty good with Ryan Tannehill. So do like A.J. Brown in GPPs. And then one of my favorite plays of the week, and it's someone I'm not seeing get a lot of buzz right now, but I'm liking Mike Williams here at 4,600. Now, I just saw he got the questionable tag. He was limited, but I'm going to assume he's going to be fine here. So just assuming he's all good to go. Mike Williams is my favorite cheap wide receiver at the moment. He's 4,600, and he's just been pretty solid this season. I mean, he's not been like absolutely elite, but his price tag doesn't mean he has to be elite. So 14 points, 19, 9, 7, 17, 9, 8, 12, 13, 7, 11, 4. I mean, the worst game was 4 points week 1. Other than that, he's been good. He's getting consistent targets, and he's a big play guy. 11th in air yards this season. He has an average at the target of 14.5. I mean, he's been long balls pretty much every game. I mean, past at least 5 games, I should say. So longest catch, 44, 52, 50, 45, 56, 43. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. I like Mike Williams here. The guy's a really good talent. He was drafted really high in the first round a couple years ago. And he had 10 touchdowns last year. And while I think 10 is more of a ceiling, he only has 1 this year. And I think that's pretty much the bare minimum floor. So I do think positive regression is going to kick in here. And I think maybe we see a touchdown streak to end the season. Maybe he just scores in every single game at the end of the year. That's definitely possible. And this is a great matchup versus Minnesota here. They're allowing 40.5 points per game to wide receivers, which is 6th most in the NFL. And he should draw some softer coverage with Keenan Allen drawing the most attention. So Mike Williams at 4,600. I think he's an excellent play this week, and he's also got big upside as well. So I think he's a good cash game play, and I also think he's a good GPP play because he's got a pretty safe floor here, and then he's got a really high ceiling as well. So Mike Williams, like him quite a bit. And then if you just want to scrape the bottom of the barrel, sorry, 1 second. My voice got a lot better. If you watch my first look video, my voice was really sore. It's getting better, so should be good by the end of the week. But Danny Amendola, he comes in at 4,100. So Marvin Jones is out for the season. And so Danny Amendola, he should see an uptick in targets here. And he's actually had 8 targets the past 2 games, which I do like. He's never going to be a big play guy. He's going to be the short to intermediate route guy, more like the short route guy. But if let's say he hits 10 targets versus Tampa Bay, I mean, I'd have a hard time seeing him not hit value of 4,100. He should be able to get double-digit points. Maybe he gets into the end zone. 4,100, not too bad. They're giving up the most points per game to wide receivers, 48.1 points per game, 19th DVA versus the pass. So I think Danny Amendola is a pretty solid player at 4,100. Other than that, not too interested. The one Tampa Bay guy, Justin Watson, I was originally going to talk about him, but Scotty Miller returned to practice, so that just kind of muddies the waters a bit. So I don't see really a reason to have to force one of these guys in my lineup. You can always look at Philly. I mean, they're dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. I mean, Aguilar, we'll see if he plays with Greg Ward. I just don't really trust any of those guys, so I'd rather play the tight end, which I'll talk about actually right now. So let's move on to the tight end position. And there's 3 guys on my radar as of right now. If I'm spending up, I like Zach Ertz here at 6K for what I was just talking about. They really they're missing bodies on the field right now. They have no wide receivers. I don't love spending up for tight ends, but I will make an exception with Zach Ertz this week. He's pretty much the only one on the roster that's got talent to throw the ball to. Aguilar's banged up. Jeffrey's gone. Djax is gone. All the targets to ERTZ here. I mean, he had 13 targets last night. And, the Miami week, he was dealing with an injury, so I'm going to give him a pass in that game. But other than that, since week 9, he's been downright elite, and so is the targets. I mean, 13 targets versus New York last week, 30 points. We're giving him a pass versus Miami. 14 targets versus Seattle, 27 points. 11 targets versus New England, 18 points. Then versus Chicago, 11 targets, 28 points. I like Zach Ertz a lot here, and this is among tight ends. He's second in target share at 24%, first in air yards, first in targets, second in weighted opportunity share. Dude's just a stud. He's a great tight end, and Wentz loves throwing the ball to his tight ends, and he's definitely going to want to look Ertz's way a lot this week, especially with all the injuries. No Alshon Jeffrey. It's also a nice matchup versus Washington, too. They're allowing the 9th most points per game to tight ends. So Zach Ertz, if you're spending up, I think he's one of the safer plays of the entire week. So like anyway, he's going to get you double-digit targets. So Zach Ertz, he's got a high ceiling. He's got a very safe floor as well. Almost to the end, so my voice, we'll make it. But next guy is going to be Tyler Higbee at 3,900. So contingent on Gerald Everett news, but this guy's been great. And Everett did not practice on Wednesday, so all systems go at the moment. Things can change, but as of right now, it's looking solid for a Tyler Higbee week. Now, his price still hasn't really caught up to what he's been doing. He had 26 points versus Arizona, 21 points versus Seattle, 19 targets the past 2 weeks, 14 receptions, over 100 yards in both games. Now, I will say he's had the best 2 matchups possible for a tight end. Arizona's giving up the most points per game to tight ends, and Seattle's giving up the second most. But he gets another solid matchup versus Dallas, too. They don't absolutely suck, but they're also allowing the 11th most points per game to the position. So Tyler Higbee, sorry. Tyler Higbee, I think he's a really excellent play this week as long as Gerald Everett is out. 3,900. I don't think he's going to get you 20 points, but I think he's a safe bet for over 10. So 3,900, not too bad of a play. So do like Tyler Higbee. And then another guy that's contingent on injury news, but Ian Thomas here at 3,100. Sorry, I had to hit the pause button. If you see my face is all red, I'm having a cough attack. My throat is so dry right now. We have one more guy to talk about, though, so we'll make it to the end here. But Ian Thomas, again, we have to wait on injury news of Greg Olsen being back or not. Now, he did return to practice today, which kind of sucked. But it was only for individual drills, so we will see. I mean, this team's a lost cause for the playoffs, so I don't really see a reason to push Greg Olsen back in action. So Ian Thomas at 3,100, he's almost been priced again. So I have no problem firing this guy back up. He's athletic. He plays well as the starter whenever he starts. He had 10 targets last week. That's pretty darn good. 10 targets. And, he's shown good connection with Kyle Allen dating back to last year. They've had a couple good games together already. He's dirt cheap. He's facing Seattle, who's the mini light version of Arizona, just for being really bad versus tight ends. They're allowing 16.8 points per game to the position, which is second most in the NFL. We see tight ends smash Seattle every single week. So Ian Thomas, 3,100, 5.5 point dogs here. I like him a lot. I mean, if he's going to flirt with 10 targets at 3,100 versus Seattle, yeah, I would take that all day. So definitely have a lot of interest in Ian Thomas as of right now. That's pretty much going to do it. I can gloss over defenses. I don't mind the Patriots. I don't love the Bucs there. But my favorite right now is probably the Packers, just 3K going up against Chicago at home. Mitch Trubisky, I mean, he's been fine the past couple games, but I'd never trust him. And, he's capable of turning the ball over, taking sacks. And they're only 3K, so I do like the Packers defense as of right now. I believe the Chargers were grading out as a good value for me on my sheet, which kind of scares me. So we'll see. I pretty much just put whoever fits at the end for my defense. I fill that position out like second to last maybe. I do my tight end and defense at the very end. So not really an important position to me. Just you got to hope they don't go negative, or just hope a chalk defense doesn't get a touchdown, and then you'll pretty much be fine every single week. But anyways, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Hope this video was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter, ChrisPennell16. I got to do some NBA stuff. I got 35 minutes to do so I make good time here. And it's only, 34 minutes long. Not too bad. At least we didn't hit an hour. I've yet to do that, so I'll try never to do that, but we'll see. But anyway, guys, I'll leave you guys with that. I'll do an extra video on Friday, probably. I'm going to work on my showdown video. I'll get that out late tonight. And then probably Friday I'll do an extra video, maybe value play or stacks or something like that. Maybe if you guys have recommendations, then I'll get my lineup builder video out on either probably Saturday morning or Friday night, so we'll see. Anyway, guys, wish you guys the best of luck. Have a great rest of the week, and then I'll see you then.